there is a difference in desire from a dog, like, go away from me and continue, do not come back to me. Keep going away. Whereas in the field, you want a dog to check in and do certain things. Part of search is expansion, and purpose. You're not reliant on that dog to go touch cover independent of you. There is a teamwork aspect of that. Whereas in duck search, you're fixed. Dog's got to go, right? And the confidence piece of a duck search, a good duck search is, if I wounded a duck, can I live with myself if we don't find it? Knowing that my dog gave this the best effort that it could to touch as much of this marsh as it could to find the duck.
All right, Mike, it's your turn. We just turned off the recording for the Ugly Dog Hunting podcast.
We did.
Now we're going to do the Gun Dog It Yourself. And I was going to say welcome to the show for the first time, but we did do that one little bonus.
It was like a profile episode.
I think there was something important going on, and I think it was North Carolina. This had been 4 years ago.
Probably the forest plan, the Pisgah-Mannahatta forest plan.
Yep, that's what it was. And so you came on and talked to me and Adam at the time about that and the importance of getting everybody involved. So, well, anyway, welcome to an actual real episode.
Awesome. My privilege to be here. Thank you.
Probably long overdue. For those that are listening to my show that may not be familiar with who you are, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everybody what it is that you do.
Sure. So, I'm Mike Neiduski. I run Ugly Dog Hunting Company, basically a online retailer for all of your hunting dog supply needs. I'm also a NAVHDA senior judge. Used to work for Pheasants Forever, Rough Grouse Society, in a number of areas, and I'm kind of a bird hunting. I sort of joke I'm a bird hunting nut, but really it's about the dogs for me. So I like to call myself a bird dog dirtbag.
Right. You have a pretty interesting path through here, because
that's a fair question.
Yeah, it's like we've known each other for a few years, but we haven't really known each other.
Sure.
Right, and so it's like it seemed like there for a few years. Every time I looked up, you were doing something different, but within the space.
Yeah.
Right. Like. Yeah. When I first entered the world, you were kind of you may have even been an apprentice when I first entered the world, but you
Probably
were
right around there.
You were a NAVHDA judge. That was kind of the thing. Then all of a sudden you're RGS, I think, and then Quail Forever, and then now it's kind of like you just keep transitioning every few months. So
sure.
It's a pretty unique perspective that you kind of know this community and industry, if you want to call it that, from a number of different angles that is kind of unique in each perspective, in each regard.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Kind of give me your rundown of what the upland community is to you, coming at it from that many different lenses.
Yeah, I think, so to back up just for context, so my former career was, I worked in higher education in a pretty intense role. I primarily did sexual assault investigations for colleges and universities, and so I got really burnt out doing that and wanted to go do something fun in my area of passion, which was conservation and bird dogs and bird hunting and those types of things. So I really what started me on that road was RGS. I think now where I am and how I got here is I wanted to work for myself, honestly, and I felt like I could move the needle from what's most important to me perspective, which is education and access, and doing both of those through business. So helping educate people on how to train their dogs, but also from a gear front, how we were just on my episode, right, talking about the watch and all the things you can do on the watch as an example, right? Helping people understand, here's all of this great equipment, you're spending all this money, how do you get the most out of it? But to the heart of your question, from an industry perspective, I'm so fortunate. I get to know so many folks over, probably the last 5-ish years is really, I've really dove into the industry. And how many genuine people there are out there, how many people really care about each other, but also the resource and are committed, maybe not always on the same page. We've certainly had some of those conversations, but committed to trying to do right by the resource, trying to do right by dogs, trying to get better dogs, have better training methods for dogs, and help people. Really what it boils down to is how can we help people have the best experience possible with their dogs outside, bird dogs. That's the whole point of the thing.
And that may, on the face of it, somebody listening to this is like, well, just go out and shoot some birds and have some fun. But it's a more complicated question than what somebody might first think when they hear it. Because what brings me to the space is different than what brings you to the space.
Sure.
The type of dog I like might be different than the type of dog you like. We can't even agree on like which type, which preference gauge of shotgun we like, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a million different ways and avenues that somebody, such as yourself, is a perfect example of like how many different hats you've had on in really a relatively short time in this space, and each one's kind of garnered a different perspective. But when we talk about how to educate and help people have the best time that they can responsibly and ethically, it's a much more challenging question than on the face of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in the community, this, right? We can't agree on gauge. We can't agree on what's the best bird, and I don't.
It's rough.
A,
grouse,
rough grouse. And B, there isn't a best bird. There is. It's an area that is ripe for divisiveness at the same time. And maybe I think I'm learning over time that this is somewhat my outlook on life. There's a lot of positivity and opportunity to be had in that. Really, we're privileged to get to do this, right?
Yeah.
To focus on the bird dogs and go out and have all of this opportunity on public lands. So you mentioned like how I got here. So I grew up a deer hunter on private land. I grew up on a farm, and I could walk out the door and carry a deer rifle and go deer hunt. What brought me to conservation was not living anywhere near home and getting a bird dog and going, what am I going to do with this thing? And where do I go? And now, right, you're here in Minnesota going to Montana to hunt public land. I'm going to Montana in a couple of weeks. I have no idea where I'm going, and I will figure it out, right? That, for me, that is growing up in the Northeast where there isn't a ton of public land, at least where I grew up in the Northeast, and not understanding that concept now as an adult. I think that is the craziest and coolest thing ever, that we can be like, I'm going to throw the dogs in the truck and drive to Montana, and I have places to go do things, and there are birds there.
Yeah.
That I'm going to find birds there, right? You're coming all the way from Tennessee to go here. We this morning drove down the road. We're just drop dogs 10 minutes from the house. All of this opportunity. For the longest time when I was growing up, I was like, I have to be really successful and go buy my own place. And I would still love to do. Who wouldn't want to do that nowadays? But the opportunity that exists on the landscape to go do that was something I had no idea, and really is probably what set my path the most, and is why I'm passionate in the ways that I am, because I think it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. When you really boil down to what it is that we do, it can be, I don't know, an outsider might qualify it as crazy. If you think let's take I'm on the way to Montana, and you're even asking like where are you going? I'm like,
yep.
I honestly don't even know where I'm going to park and lay my head tonight.
Yeah.
Traveling to get out there. We're just gonna figure it out as we go along. And to an outsider, they may think that's crazy, but to us, we get it, because part of the adventure, like you said, you have no idea where you're gonna go or what you're doing in Montana, but that's part of the adventure to me.
Yeah.
Be safe about it. Like,
sure.
It's like, I think I told you that, you can set up Garmin inReach, share a link with your friends and family. And I did that, I'm responsible and gave that to my wife before leaving. But she's kind of grown accustomed to it to where like, where are you going to be? I'm like, I have no idea.
Yep.
I'll let you know, or you can ping the GPS and it'll let you know.
Yep.
But that's part of the adventure. But some people like it a little bit more, like we know exactly where we're going. We're going to get here at this time. We're going to do this. We're going to drop this many dogs. But it sounds like you have a little bit of, shared interests of just like, let's just wing it and see where we end up. Yeah, that's part of the fun.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you got into it, again, it started off, you were a judge kind of first and foremost when I first met you.
Sure.
Do you think being a judge and seeing all those dogs lit a fire in you to get more involved, Like, was that your first, like, really entrance into taking the next step to where it's no longer I have a bird dog, how do I train the dog? But it's like, it's more or less I'm actually going to try and give back to the community, so to speak.
I would say it was more so giving back and flipping that more on the ear of becoming a judge will make me a better trainer and make me a better handler. That's how I looked at it. Of I've been in this, I've done enough, I've run a utility dog in NAVHDA. I want to do this because I see it as an opportunity to give back, to volunteer, to increase leadership in an organization, at least in some capacity. But also, if I do this, I will have exposure to way more dogs, way more scenarios, way more places than I have right now, and that will translate to what makes things better for me and my dogs, because I get the opportunity on my episode. If you're coming here from that one, we talked about reading dogs. I'm a firm believer that you learn to read dogs through repetition and experience, and what better opportunity to read way more dogs
to
because
see them nonstop.
become a judge. Yeah. You know, I pulled my judge numbers recently through the NAVHDA portal, and I'm somewhere near 1,000 dogs in when did I start judging? When I was 30, so 8 years. So I judge typically more than 100 dogs a year, and so being able to see, and that's just in judging, right? And let alone training days and maybe working with a client dog here or there or friends or whatever. You start to see that many dogs, you can really start putting pieces together on how to read behavior and all of those types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you kind of went exactly where I was heading with this is like, the judge, you're essentially hitting that multiplier to where, if you just got a dog and you started training your dog by yourself, you're going to learn, right? But if you can hit that multiplier to where if I can learn, this amount of information from this one dog, surely multiplying that to 100 a year, that's going to just pay dividends when it comes to not only training your own dog, but just being around dogs in general, being able to help your buddies, being able to help somebody new coming in. And even so, like, I've said it on the podcast before, so this is nothing new, but just because you're a NAVHDA judge, that doesn't make you a good trainer. But watching and just seeing that many dogs, just being around it through osmosis, it's just going to naturally come into you where, like, if you take your average person that is just getting into the space, maybe they're more knowledgeable on training methods and whatnot, but you can't discredit the hands-on experience and knowledge that you gain from not only watching the dogs, but that many handlers do it too. And so when you're in the field watching all these handlers, when you talk about the importance of being able to read a dog and handle a dog, what are some of the more like common errors or even quality things like that you would advise people? Like what's the good and the bad that you notice by seeing so many handlers?
Yeah, and just to like put a bow on that, the time piece, like what comes to mind if you're like a self-improvement person, like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, like becoming a judge ramps that 10,000 hours concept, gets you that much closer to the 10,000 hours number, right? The one thing that stands out to me as a big is really the most profound is how a handler handles birds in front of their dog, particularly in a utility dog context, and even in natural ability in puppies. How a handler approaches a dog on point, how they set their gunners up, and how they kick a bird, right, or flush a bird. So beginners typically, they walk right up the back of the dog, they walk in front of the dog, they kick the bird straight away. The dog can't see. The dog, you're promoting the dog to move because you're, unbeknownst to you, you're cutting off what that dog needs. What you expect of it is to mark the bird and retrieve, and you're kicking the bird where the dog can't see. Or there's cover, and you don't choose where you try. Birds are going to do what birds are going to do, but I've watched handlers kick birds into places that gunners can't shoot them, or that the dog can't see. And if it's a particularly antsy dog, maybe that leads to the dog breaking, because the dog is going to instinctually move to mark. And then once it's moving, it takes a heck of a lot of self-control for that dog to stop, right? So I think that for me has really set things up of watching person after person rode right up the back of a dog, which if you do this for long enough, you learn all that is doing is promoting competition and putting pressure on a dog to move because you're coming right up. Whereas I'm a big promoter of like, let's try to put gunners at sort of nose and tail, right? And kick a bird perpendicular to a dog, not straight away from a dog, because, it's a test. It's somewhat manufactured. We can, I don't love the word manipulate in this situation, but we can manufacture how this plays out because it's a pen raised planted bird. Use that to your advantage in this scenario and try to set the dog up for success, and you and your gunners, and give it a clear picture, a safe picture for gunners to shoot, and not promote the dog to move.
Yeah.
Or in an NA dog, right? Like you want to showcase the dog on point, or maybe you want to help it be a bit more cooperative and maybe get a hold of the dog after we've seen it do what it needs to do. Don't go right up its back, because particularly as a puppy, right? Like they're still in competition mode. So figure out, come at the dog from the side or the front. Don't make it about the teamwork, not about me versus you.
Yeah.
I think those are really, really big ones. The other one, this is a training thing, but I see it manifest in tests. I'm a big proponent on retrieves. If you have a finish issue on a retrieve, that's not a fetch issue or a hold issue. That's a hear issue, right? I told you, like, what fetch is. You went up and you picked the bird up. You know what hold is because you're holding it in your mouth. But if it's from me to you away and issues happen, that's a finish issue, not a hold issue, not a retrieve, not a fetch issue. That's a come. Mm-hmm. The amount of people who are, they're like hold, or the command that, they know they need to use a command, so they're going to use it, but they use fetch or they use hold. I'm like,
no.
That heel, here, come, pick one, tell the dog to finish, get him focused on coming back to you. And good handlers know those types of quirks of get them reoriented on you. Don't make it about what's in their mouth. Make it about finishing the task. I think is something that I see a ton, and particularly in a utility test, there's so many retrieving opportunities that if that's not dialed in, that comes out.
Yeah, and that's what I love about these type of conversations, because there's 20 different ways we could take any of this. But real quick on the flushing aspect, you mentioned about it, we're manufacturing it in a pen raised bird environment, but I would say by not forcing myself, but experiencing that scenario to where you are controlling your gunners and you are being thoughtful on how you flush and learning that, there's a direct application in wild bird hunting, especially if you start taking new people and you're directing people how to safely set up for a shot and also how to flush. Like there's true value in that outside of just the testing environment. I know that, maybe tests or trials sometimes get shortchanged as if it doesn't apply to the wild bird field. I would say that's one of the lessons that, like, by practicing it in the training field, can directly improve your actual wild bird hunt, especially if you're taking new people in and around your dogs. Obviously, safety's first and foremost, but the retrieve thing, that's something it's come up quite a bit on this show in recent months, just talking about a lot of things. But a lot of what you said, I think a lot of people think of the retrieve as one thing, one behavior. And if you really think about the retrieve, there's so many aspects of that retrieve that if you just isolate each individual step and you don't just group the retrieve as the retrieve, it's like you have everything from how to line them up, acquire the target, send them, the pace of which they're going, picking it up, how they hold it, how they bring it back. Like there's a lot of little things that if you just treat that as an entire big picture, you're never going to be able to work on any one of those individual tasks.
Yeah.
And what you talked about on that being a recall, it is a finishing issue, and there's a lot of things that go into that. But you pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. Is like, people know that they are supposed to give a command, And it's not even the command that addresses what they're actually wanting the dog to do. It's like, I want the dog by my side. Well, then why would you tell them to fetch, which 5 seconds ago meant go away from me to pick up an item, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, let's say that the handler gets into a scenario where, all right, well, I said fetch, the dog is still mouthing it or not wanting to bring it back to me, and then I'm going to use pressure. Well, 5 seconds ago, the pressure meant go away from me and go get it. Now you're trying to use it to come back to you. Oh, and by the way, if you're too high on that pressure, now you're creating a situation to where you're kind of punishing the dog in that situation to where, you know, you may not be intending on punishing that dog bringing the bird back to you, but that's how the dog perceives it. Yeah. So it's really interesting how just being in the field and watching that over and over and over again, I have to think that helps you even more so when it is time that your dog is on the ground and you recognize this is about to happen, and let me just get out in front of it. Let me just go ahead and give a recall or a heel, like you said. Yeah. And really, like, I want the dog to bring the item back to me, so let's give them a command that actually is bring it back to me, and let's take the focus off of the mouthiness or whatever's going on with the mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that it's all of that focus, and the same you could break that out to going back to the field, right? Steadiness, and when I give instructions, I always tell people if you need a command, use it. Don't be mealy-mouthed. Don't be indecisive. Make it count. And you see this in steadiness sequences with people. The wheels are starting to come off, and they could walk up to the dog and give it a hard whoa, right out of the gate. And they're worried they can't, or they don't want to, or they don't understand. Because it is, particularly at a utility level, like you're testing to a standard, right? To a set amount of behaviors. They don't understand that just because they give the dog one whoa doesn't mean that they failed or they're out for the day. And so how and when to give that command to do your best to make it count, right? It's a dog. I think that's part of why we all love it, right? They're not robots. So who knows what can happen on any given day, right? But in those scenarios, if the dog's getting happy feet or maybe it broke on the last bird, you're better off giving it a reminder of, hey, stand still, versus I'm going to kick this bird and we're going to shoot it and I'm going to hope you stand still. And if you don't stand still, I'm going to tell you to whoa and hope you stop. Think about the amount of pressure on a dog in that scenario. It's way more pressure and way harder to get that dog to stop on the back end than it is on the front end to go, hey, stand still.
Yeah.
Right. Don't forget, in this scenario, we stand still. Don't move till I tell you. Right. And if the dog blows you off, well, the dog was going to blow you off anyway. You might as well have at least tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've all been in the field to where you see the wheels starting to come off, and you're watching it happen, and you can't stop it, right?
Yeah.
And then to your point, when it's test day, a lot of dogs, like, once they figure out, like, oh, this is not a training scenario. Dad doesn't have the e-collar. He's not correcting me. Like, say you're the type of person that you go out and you're always hacking your dog, and you're just always over here, go over there, whoa, whatever, fill in the blank. You're saying, yelling a million different commands. Well, then on test day, you go out there and you handle the dog completely different.
Yeah.
That dog knows what's up. He learned, they've recognized real quick. And to your point, like, it might be, even if it does dock you points, like, it's got to be better than letting the wheels come completely off the train and just seeing where you end up.
Yeah. No, I tell people, handle your dog like you normally would. Now, if you're doing something that I don't want you to do, I'll tell you. Or if I want to see something different, I'll tell you. But otherwise, I mean, I ask this for particular reasons when I'm judging usually, but I will say, like, do you hunt like this? And most times people go, no. I'm like, then why are we whatever it is, why are we doing this? Because like, people will walk stupid slow, or they like march through the field, and it's like, are we in a race? What are we doing? And they're nervous, or they don't trust their dog, and it's like, there's no running in NAVHDA, so calm down, like, just, and if the dog ain't gonna hold, the dog ain't gonna hold. But I think, to your point, if you talk to your dog a lot when you run it, it's going to notice if you're silent.
Yeah.
So
run it how you run it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. But people get nervous, man.
Oh,
The test
I
jitters,
get nervous.
Yeah. See, I can honestly say that I didn't particularly get nervous. I've tested 3 times
Sure.
in NAVHDA, 4, 3, something like that. I just kind of go into it. It is what it is. Like all the hard work is done. Like we've gotten to this. Whatever's gonna happen today is
gonna happen.
It's gonna happen regardless. And but some people, man, like they just get tore up. Like it just changes them, and they do everything completely different than what they normally would. And that is directly causing the dog to act differently than what it normally would. And so, do you have any advice? Have you noticed anybody that kind of comes over their test jitters, or is it just kind of each their own? And
yeah, I think there is an element of to each their own. I am of the camp of if you're not a little nervous, like
you don't care enough.
Not that you don't care enough, but like, is it that fun for you anymore if you're not nervous?
Yeah.
I have come to learn though over time that everybody is different, but I think there's something to have a little bit. Everybody's different, right? But like I think performance anxiety can push you to perform if you're performance oriented. That said, so my breeder, for example, Misty Klug, she's run a bunch of dogs, and I had her on the Ugly Dog podcast, and I was like, "Do you get nervous?" She's like, "No, and not a lick." And I'm like, "How do you not like you?" She ran 3 invitational dogs last year and passed all 3 of them. And she was like, "No, but to your point, the hard part's over. I trust my training, and the more I do this, the more I realize that if you trust your training and you know what to expect, that level of nerves or anxiety significantly decreases. Now, sure, can anything happen on test day? Absolutely. But if you're going into test day and your training has been bulletproof, your level of nerves should be much lower than if you're going into it going, I'm going to see what dog shows up today. right? And I've been there. And that's just, for whatever reason, it goes back to trusting your dog. And I would say the best walks I have as a judge are people that trust their dog.
Yeah.
And having a dog now that I trust, at least in certain aspects, I know what that feels like, and there is not nerves there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way, but I think that also comes with time. I think it's probably hard to really trust your training and the dog when it's your first dog and your first scenario and your first time. And
yeah. I mean, you don't know until you're thrown into that situation, and it's like I can say that I was never nervous, but I still had a certain level of anxiety. But I can honestly say it was more like I wanted the dog to do the job that I knew that it could do.
Yeah.
Right. It was more out of like, go prove it.
Mm-hmm.
Like for yourself. I know that sounds weird to say that
Sure.
about the dog, but it's just like the training's done. I'm not nervous about. We're here. We're ready. We're gonna do what it is. But you want it so bad for your dog.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like I don't get nervous, but I still want it really bad for them. Just because we wouldn't be out there testing our dog. I wouldn't say we, because there's some people that they just let it rip. Like, let's just see what happens. But the majority of people that are gonna test their dog, they're there because they know their dog can do the job to some extent.
Yeah.
Then it's just kind of like, well, let's just see where it lands. Nobody's out there, just being like, well, nobody's trying to fail.
No.
Yeah.
But I think two things that go off of that. So, one is I think there's an interesting orientation even in this conversation that we're having of testing and wanting to perform, right? And particularly in NAVHDA, right? People run utility with an eye towards the invitational.
Right.
In the spirit of the utility test, it was where does your dog measure up and from a functional finished hunting dog perspective, right? I think going into it with that mindset is helpful. One of the things I do on the Ugly Dog Instagram page every Friday, I do a Q&A in the stories. Just today, their question was, I'm running utility tomorrow. What advice do you have for me? So my first piece of advice was trust your training. Number 2 is remember why you're there. Particularly, you're there to test your dog, to see how it does, to have fun, and to learn, right? And part of testing is it's take the mindset you would run NA and let's see how this puppy has developed and apply it to let's see how this dog has developed and taken what I've tried to teach it according to all of these tasks. I think if you go into it with that mindset versus I have to perform because if I perform I get to this thing, you take out really the biggest pieces, which is I would argue the problem, and some of it is the ego, right?
Yeah.
Like, because my third point was, remember, the dog gives a damn what the score is.
They're having fun.
They don't care. They don't know that. They're just like, it's another day, and Dad doesn't have the e-collar on. Rock on, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's have a party. And so, like, trying to take that out of it, and I say that, knowing I'm running utility in a month, and I already have a little bit of like, ooh, how's this gonna go, right? But I'm like, she's gonna be coming back from Montana. It's grouse season. Like, she gives a damn what happens on test day, and I have to remember that. And I have a personal rule: no matter what, you ride home in the front seat because you're still my dog, and I still love you, and we're still gonna go hunting, and you're still my buddy, And I think that trying to remember that is important. The people I think that have the worst time testing are the ones that get caught up in the ego piece.
Yeah.
We're all human. We're not infallible, so we make mistakes. But the people I see that like really want to have a conversation and make a to-do about something at the end of the day, it becomes about it's like nitpicky about the score, not about like let's talk about the accurate picture of the dog and an honest assessment,
And that's completely fair, but also it's interesting is like we are all human, and you just said it yourself to where in NA we're really testing the dog. We're judging the dog on does it have this capability or not. Then you get to utility, and it's like we're testing, did my preparation for you get you to the standpoint that it needs to be?
Yeah.
Right.
And you're handling during the test.
And you're handling, and we can't sit here and say that how we handle and read our dogs matter in this instant, but over here it doesn't. So it is kind of a give take. And so I agree. It is the ego more often than not. Like, somebody's not upset that their dog got a prize 2 instead of a prize 1. Unless it's some sort of like, my dog deserves it, whether that's through the lens of how you trained it or because you truly believe your dog deserved it. But ego, like you can't really get there without it, right? Because we are testing and judging how they actually prepared their dog for that test day. So it's going to get wrapped up one way or another in there.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I could agree with that. And I think too, to how we started this conversation, especially at utility level, it's a team.
It is.
And while the dog gets the score, there are things that you can do to help. And if there are things that you can do to help, there are things that you can do to hurt.
Right. and that's the important part right there is like, what do you do in that instance to where something didn't go right? Do you blame the dog or do you blame yourself? Do you look at yourself first? And to me, that's where the ego thing comes into play, because it's like at the end of the day, it's hard not to get wrapped up in this because you do prepare all year in the off season to get ready for this test. And again, we're all out there trying to get, nobody's out there trying to get a prize 2 instead of a prize 1. It might be acceptable for some people, but at the end of the day, no, I don't think you ask 10 out of 10 people, they're all going to say that, yeah, I want the prize 1. Yeah. Like nobody's going out there for silver.
No.
But it is a fine line, because if something unravels and your first response is not what did I do wrong? And your first response is the dog, then that's where the ego, like it's okay, you're you're directly prohibiting yourself from improving. And maybe not on this test, maybe it's too late for this one, but on the next one, if you don't recognize the lessons that were offered to you in that experience, you know, the running it again the next weekend isn't going to help.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of in anything. It's only a failure if you didn't learn from it.
Right.
You know, in NAVHDA and dogs and bird hunting, any of it, life. As long as you're going to look at it and go, well, that didn't go well.
Yeah.
Why didn't that go well? What do I need to work on?
Yep.
All right. What do we need to work? Let's go work on that.
And part of it might be putting yourself in the position to where if you are the really nervous handler going in there, go run more tests, trials in front of people. Get that out of your system, right? Like put yourself in the awkward positions to be critiqued by other people, because maybe, you know, the dog did pick up off that nervous energy, or maybe you weren't consistent or your timing was off on something because you were nervous. And to me, like I'm a firm believer in like just put yourself in those weird positions as much as possible and come out the other end.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And I even think about it, you know, with me. So this test coming up and I'm a little nervous, but I've got some things I need to work on. And so the thing that comes to mind for me with Mac, my short hair, I don't worry about her steadiness. Now I might get a 3 because I'm coming off of a week of bird hunting in Montana, but I know that. But I also know her, and I know I can let her do pretty much whatever the hell she wants in Montana, and maybe she'll get a 2. But in my brain, I'm like, in a week I can go, hey, you got to pay attention again, and she'll go, knowing her, I got to pay attention again. Now there's certain other things that are bigger holes in her game, so to speak, and in my game, to your point of the self-reflection, on my episode, we were talking about her whining. She whines at the water because I've thrown a gajillion marks for her in the water while she's whining, and I was like, oh, I'll fix that later. And literally, I would say that, oh, I'll fix that later. And this summer, it came time for me to fix that, and I'm still trying to fix it, right? And I know that, and I'm like, okay, like, it'll be what it'll be. But if it's an issue in the test day, that's my fault, because I know what I did to create it.
Yeah,
you know.
And you're accepting of it. Like it's just I'll fix that later. Well, now is later, and you know what? It's like, all right, well, this is self-induced here. All right, like let's fix it.
I did this to myself.
Yeah, and we've all been there. It's like I don't care about it right now, and it's just like you almost want to go back in time and a year or two ago, be like, just care, just fix it right now, and it's not an issue. But hey, it is what it is. I'm curious. When we talk about the testing, all of this is steeped in creating the better hunting dog.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people fall in love with the testing because it's fun.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just call it.
People are achievement oriented.
It is. Do you have any concern with the functionality of the test almost losing meaning in today's day and age, to where some people just start chasing the papers more so than they lose the purpose of, I'm here to create a quality hunting dog. Yeah. And they get into prize chasing rather than the development of the dog.
Yes. And this is where, as a NAVHDA judge, I have to say, this is my personal opinion. This is not a NAVHDA opinion, but this is a strong personal opinion.
Yeah.
Whether it's NAVHDA, whether it's shoot to retrieve, retriever trials, field trials, whatever it is, dog sport, in the hunting world without real world application is a danger to real world application over time. So I talk a lot around NAVHDA because that's what I'm most involved in, and that's what I see the most because I'm so close to it. I think it's a particularly, I want people, and you've, I think, talked about this too. I want people that have bird dogs to get the most out of their dogs. I think there is a challenge of, so let's take Terry Ann Fernando as a friend, mutual friend of ours, as a great example of how things can go a positive, and I'll also insert ways that could go negative. When Terry Ann got Zara, her Vizsla, she didn't hunt. She got a Vizsla to run with, but also was achievement oriented and wanted to do more with her dog. And so she really started training, and then saw people run utility and wanted to go pursue that path. That's great. That also brought her and gave her the confidence to go hunting. And she now hunts a lot with Zara. She still does the dog sports and field trials and whatnot, but she's a bird hunter. I think the challenge that I see is people that come to it with no hunting background and very minimal or no desire and or pursuit towards hunting. I think that's where you can get into a problem, and then it becomes about sort of point chasing, and you lose that knowledge around real world application. So in a NAVHDA test, particularly, let's talk about pointing, right? A pointing dog needs to have a healthy respect for birds. It needs to not crowd birds. It needs to be cognizant of pressure and how it pressures a bird. And one of the things that people have a hard time understanding, if maybe they have some pointing issues, they don't understand, if they don't have real world application, that a dog that points a foot away from a bird staring at it is not a proper pointing dog, because a wild bird is not going to tolerate that. And these organizations were created around wild bird dogs, right? Like, let's have the best, like VDD and all of those, and then even NAVHDA with it from a breed registry perspective, and really like the NA testing is to help people understand how a litter came out so they know how to fix the next one, right? And even a utility dog is a demonstration of, so we took an NA dog and we brought it forward from an education and a training perspective. Here's how a dog can take training. Yes, like you said, there is trainer influence in that, but still it has to be a dog of sound mind and capability to take that training and apply it. I think in these scenarios where if you don't have that real world hunting experience, you're like, oh, the dog pointed. Well, sure, it pointed a foot away from the bird in a wild bird context. The dog didn't point appropriately. Now, is that training? We talked about this on the episode that you just did with me. Is that training induced? Probably, but it's still not an appropriate point, right, for what we're after, because the goal is to take a dog and go do this on wild birds. And I have seen this in the hunting community, and I don't know why this summer, but the handful of people that have said either I am or I know outfitters out west that guide that want nothing to do with taking people fresh off the invitational.
Yeah.
Because the dog is so keyed into the test that it maybe over time, right, the skill set transfers, but the dog needs the time and space to translate. I think Jason Carter wrote an article about this. Dogs need time and space to translate expectations in a training and a testing scenario to wild birds.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, to your question, people need to be cognizant of that. And I'm not saying if you don't hunt, don't do it. But in my opinion, presenting an uninformed opinion about what's appropriate in a hunting scenario, in a testing scenario, dilutes the value of the testing score, so to speak. Whereas you should, if you look at it through the eye of what's appropriate in a hunting scenario, that should be the trump card, if you will. Like, is I say this in testing, right? So part of being a judge is to like manage environment. And we want to provide a fair opportunity for everybody, right? But people can get hung up on, well, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And I'm like, so you'll appreciate this, right? So duck search. The typical scenario or order of events in a utility test is we do duck search, and then we do the remain by and steady by retrieve of duck sequence, right? Because the thought process being, I'd rather tell a dog to go do a blind first before I do a retrieve, right? Because if we do the retrieve first, maybe the dog is going to pop on the duck search because it just got a retrieve. Mm-hmm. Do you duck hunt much?
Opportunistic.
Sure.
Originally, years ago, I did a lot more of it than what I do now.
So what I like to tell people, I'm like, all right, if you duck hunt, and let's apply this to a hunting scenario, is the only bird you cripple the first bird?
Right.
But if you're a good duck hunter, you can shoot 6 ducks. So you cripple the first one, need a duck search. Every other one you drop in the decoys. How realistic is that?
Yeah.
Right? The goal of this is to have the dog that can do both. The order of events shouldn't matter. Now, even do I stick to that order of events? Yeah, I'm not out here to hang someone.
Yeah.
But if we have to do it in a different scenario, or you see this with chapters where maybe we have to use the same water, we'll try not to use the same entry point. But even then, I go back to, who cares?
You're duck hunting the same blind.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
In a real world application, deal with it.
Yeah.
And we'll judge it accordingly. But if it's applied to a hunting scenario, send the dog.
Yeah. I think it becomes challenging when you're trying to talk about certain behaviors steeped in a purpose or specific functionality in an activity that the handler is completely unfamiliar with.
Yeah.
And it's not to denigrate or bash the person that doesn't hunt. It's just like, hey, you got a bird dog. I'm happy you're here.
100%.
I'm happy you're having fun. I'm happy your dog's having fun, whether you ever actually go buy a hunting license or not. Like, I encourage you to. But it's hard for them to understand the end goal for that behavior if they don't understand the practicality of that behavior.
Correct.
This may be a horrible analogy, but I'm going to take a stab at it. Is I often think about in life now to where something comes up like mathematical. I think back to like high school to where I remember learning this. Maybe if somebody took 5 seconds to explain to me, like in real life application, there's the word. In real life application, how this might benefit me to know. Like, I feel like that would retain. I would have learned it a little bit better, right? To where fast forward now I need that skill or need that information. It's like I vaguely remember it, but I don't. And so I kind of look at it that way. Is like, if you don't know why you're training something, then it doesn't matter. And then if something goes awry or goes off pace, you don't really know how to fix it because you don't know what that actual behavior is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And then when you go to a NAVHDA training day and you get the awesome, great intended, good intended intentions from the judges or whoever that's on test day, I'm going to be looking for this. That is my biggest pet peeve. At NAVHDA training days is if somebody's asking for training help and the person trying to help them starts off the sentence with on test day, stop listening to them. I get so tired of that. Talk about it from a behavior and skill set point of view.
Yeah.
Stop talking about it from a test point of view because going back to the guys out west, they don't want the VCs because so many of those dogs were just trained to that specific task.
Yeah.
And that test. There was no generalization. There was no proofing. To your point, with enough reps, it might translate to a real wild bird scenario if there's enough common situations for that dog to key in on, the cues that we were talking about at the very start of this, right? And that's where I come at this is there's so many people, and I welcome everybody into the gun dog space. I'll help anybody, but try before you get involved in your chapter and you have a say in like how things are run. Try and understand what the actual like objective goal is supposed to be for these dogs. To me, I think that's something that as a community we could do a lot better within the testing community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I want to be clear too. Come one, come all. I think the more we talk about this, like with culture, right? The more people that have bird dogs that understand why bird dogs are on the landscape, and why, what their purpose is and how cool wild birds are and whether they choose to hunt them or not, that connection and the more we can do to broaden folks' horizons around that, the better. But I think when it becomes, if your sole purpose is the achievement, and again, the achievement's for you, not the dog, if you only focus on that over time, I think you can dilute kind of the point of the thing, right? Because if it's focused on, well, the dog pointed, but if we don't think about pointing in the context of how does this manifest with wild birds, then do we have a bunch of dogs that rode and, they stop when they're a foot away from the bird, right? And then if you were to take that dog out here and run them on wild pheasants or go to Kansas on quail or in the woods for rough grouse or out, in Sharpie and Hun country, you're never going to get a bird pointed.
Yeah.
Right. And so then it's a hunting dog, right? It's, in NAVHDA, it's Versatile Hunting Dog Association, right? So like the hunting dog piece is the critical piece. And so knowing, like you said, like you're here because you have a hunting dog. So the root of this thing is the hunting piece. And so if we forget that and it just becomes about doing XYZ task, you've lost the flavor of it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the road is paved in unintended consequences.
Sure.
Right. And when you do something such as utility, let's call it, it's a very obedience driven test. A lot of retrieving is built into that.
Yeah.
A lot of people's, process for training for that unintentionally results in a dog getting sucked into you in the field. It loses some of its field search, if you will. And I think a better understanding of, the purpose of the hunting behind all of this is to recognize that by gaining the control over here, if I'm reining them in the field, that's more or less not what we're after for this hunting dog experience. But, it might still be good enough on test day, whereas in an actual hunting scenario, we don't want to see that. So maybe it's like, okay, let's slow down. Let's go about it a different way. Maybe we don't sacrifice the actual hunt or search in the dog to gain the control in this other aspect of the test.
Yeah, we were talking about this, I think, last night. Again, I'll own this as my personal opinion. I think in these scenarios, if you want a wild bird dog, you're better off to take that dog hunting for 3 seasons.
3 seasons?
Right. At least two. And then, and I'm not saying don't force break the dog, but like, don't really dial in the test and go for the test and really start training for the test until it's hunted some. And by some, I mean more than just like 6 months old, right? To really, really give that dog time to develop and grow and understand how to hunt. And then, all right, here's hunting. You love hunting. All right, now I'm going to start putting some controls around how I want you to hunt and things I want you to do while you're hunting. And I mean, I'm a big proponent on you can do a trained retrieve or a force break or whatever fancy word you want to talk about training a dog to retrieve. You can do that, when the dog's mature enough to understand it. But I think when you start to railroad a dog into all of the things in a utility test early, it's that dog's still developing. So then what that dog comes to believe is this is how I hunt, right? Like I have to be on pins and needles and under this much control in this, at this young age. This is what it should be like for the rest of my life. Whereas, and maybe this is more my philosophy and and probably biased of what I like in a dog. I want you to run like a hellion in the field. And I want you to be connected.
Yeah.
I want you to know where I am. And I want you to hold point. I want to trust you. And I want you to retrieve when I shoot the bird. But I want that drive, that desire. I think most people do. Like, whether you're a closer working dog, if you're a 50-yard dog, like I still want you to do it with a sense of style and enthusiasm and purpose. I think we're not going to name names, but we were talking about some people that we know that have accomplished a lot with young dogs. You take that dog that was a VC at 2 or 3 and watch it hunt at 6, and you can see how it still attacks a field like a young utility dog would, because it doesn't necessarily have the punch to be like, oh, I see cover 200 yards over there, I'm going to make a move, right? And for me, I mean, maybe I'll eat my words, but I would rather have the dog that I know maybe runs a little hot in a utility field that I can handle than having a dog where I got to walk it into birds.
Right.
Right. And going back to as a judge, I could if there was a thing on the and part of it comes out in search, but like we all do the same course. Some dogs find birds, and some dogs, I think, we sort of put into birds, and it's not. That's probably too harsh of a statement, but because there are dogs, I think, that are driven to be bird finders, and I think you've probably seen this. The more you do this, you can see a dog and be like, "Oh no, I see you." Like you are constantly looking and objective hunting and all of these things. And there are some dogs that I'm out here hunting, and if I find a bird, great.
Yeah.
And I'll handle it, but I'm not. They don't have the punch or the wherewithal or the whatever to go. My single focus is to like go find a frickin' bird.
Yep. And I think I can speak to that on both levels, to where my Muncie is more or less that dog that you're talking. Like, I can take her in a training field and she'll do it. But she's not searching like Quinn or Rachel is, right? Like Quinn it's almost like a dog that asks for forgiveness more so than permission. Like they're going to look up and be like, I see that transition over there. And like if that dog thinks there might be a bird in there, they're going to go check that out. Whereas, Lucy, who is my quote unquote, utility dog, we talked about that, to where I tested her way too early. And I really think that I reined her in.
Took something out of her.
I took a lot out of her. She's going to look to me like, do you want me to go check that tree line over there? And when we're talking about a wild bird dog, I don't want the dog that asks me, do you want me to go check that tree line? I want the dog that goes and checks the tree line.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what we're talking about is having the confidence and the peace of mind and comfort of knowing their job. And, you talked about that just a second ago on the test, and this is the most challenging part of the test. It's not the steadiness. It's not the duck search. It's not the blind or the retrieve. It's all of it in one day. That is the hardest part about a utility test, is getting a dog mentally to where it can do the stop-start 4 or 5 times throughout the day, and being comfortable with that while not getting sucked in and completely dependent on you, but to your point, still works with you.
Yeah.
And those are the dogs that, like, you always know it when you see it.
Yeah.
But to your point, you more so than me, you've been in the field as a judge, me just helping people out. There are those dogs that they aren't finding the birds, they're just happening upon the birds.
Yeah.
And they'll still handle them, but those dogs, they pass the test just like the other ones as well. So they're gonna have purpose. They're gonna have,
they're gonna be productive. But I think it's really hard to articulate, and this goes back to, I don't remember whether it was this conversation or on mine. You're talking about reading a dog. There are dogs where you look at it and you're like, oh, you are a hunting dog.
Yeah.
Period. And there are others where it's, I'm along for the ride. You mentioning Lucy is a great point, right? So we were running dogs this morning, and at one point we stopped. One of the dogs got on something and was chasing it. So we're standing there talking, and Quinn and my short hair Mac were not around us the whole time, and they weren't the dog chasing. They were like, well, if y'all are going to stand there, we're going to go touch every square inch of this piece of property that we can. And every 5 minutes or whatever, a couple minutes, they'd pop out on the trail and go, oh, you're still there.
Yep.
Bye. Right? I'm not saying that a dog that doesn't do that doesn't have a proper search, but there is a difference between the dogs that are going to hang out with us because we're not walking, versus the dog that is like, I have the chance to hunt. Bye.
Yeah.
I
know there's not a bird here.
Yeah.
There might be a bird.
So I'm going to go
there.
find one.
Yeah.
Right? You see it even in duck search. If you've watched enough duck searches, there are dogs that will go out and will search, and they'll be methodical. And there's nothing wrong with methodical. And then maybe this is more of a style point, but there is nothing like watching a dog attack a marsh. It'd be like, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and I am going to tear this thing apart trying to find a duck.
Yeah.
And you can see the difference between I'm methodically searching and where is this duck? I cannot wait to find it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's some that just, it's like they're almost angry at the water that just, where's the duck? I know it's out here. It's, The duck search, man, that's an interesting piece. That's one that, if you don't know what the end result is supposed to look like, very often you hear people like, I just they read the rule book or somebody
Mm-hmm.
tells them, and they don't really understand it until they see it. And something that I'd be curious on your thought process on this, and of course this is probably your personal opinion,
Sure.
not NAVHDA's, but where do you land on the whole, when I look at duck search and it's explained to me that I expect that dog to search the pond or marsh the same way as they're expected to in the field, but to get a prize one, it's required to get a 4 in duck search,
Mm.
and in the field search, they can get by with a 3 to get that prize one. That's something that's
Mm.
never jived with me, and I understand that there's very few dogs that this even applies to on a
Sure.
yearly basis, but just on a consistency basis, what's your thought process on that?
That's a really great question, and I don't know that I've ever dove into that discussion or debate with someone. So that gives me opportunity to have some of those conversations. And again, this is we're talking about hypothetical scenarios, and I have to do the
Yeah.
I'm speaking for me. That's Mike Neiduski, not NAVHDA as the organization. I think a couple of things come to mind on that. One, um, you can get a 3 or a lower score. You can get a lower score in search for a dog that doesn't search well, or you can get a lower score in search for a dog that searches with reckless abandonment with complete disregard for its handler, right? And we're like, a dog can be so uncooperative in the field or so disobedient in the field that it impacts the search score, right? Whereas, and I mean, and this is true in duck search to a certain extent, but the idea of duck search, because at least in the field you're walking with the dog, right? You're continually moving your position.
Yeah.
In duck search, you're standing still, right? And a duck, like, I'm in the blind,
Yeah.
go find it. So there is a difference in desire from a dog, like, go away from me and continue, do not come back to me, keep going away,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas in the field, you want a dog to check in and do certain things, um, as well as, part of search is expansion, and purpose. Because in the field you can move around, you're not reliant on that dog to go touch cover independent of you. There is a teamwork aspect of that. Whereas in duck search, you're fixed. The dog's got to go, right? And the confidence piece of a duck search, a good duck search is, if I wounded a duck, can I live with myself if we don't find it? Knowing that my dog gave this, the best effort that it could to touch as much of this march as it could to find the duck. Whereas, and some people would argue, me included, is that realistic in duck hunting if I wound a duck? Probably not, because I'm going to move around or I'm going to throw a rock or do
Get
something
in a
that,
canoe, go
right?
out, whatever. Yeah.
But it's a manufactured situation, and we're trying to see, like, do you have the moxie or not? In the field, in a hunting scenario, you might be a closer working dog. You might not have that punch, but you're still serviceable to go find game, point it, produce it, all of those, and handle it appropriately. That it is not, from like a predicate perspective, not as imperative as the duck search, which is, like, if you don't go search, we're not recovering this.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and that is a good perspective. I mean, that's one of the better, because I've asked. It's one of my, like, I like asking
Yeah.
judges that perspective, because especially when it comes to duck search, I've been at the training day to where you have 4 or 5 judges all there, all telling you different things of what they're supposed to see on a duck search,
Mm-hmm.
right? This judge over here wants to see the dog take a completely wide open body of water
Sure.
and swim out there where there's no objectives and there's nothing out there for the duck to
Mm-hmm.
be around, but yet we're still supposed to expect the dog to go out there and check it off its list. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, meanwhile, this guy over here doesn't care, and so the duck search, I think there's a lot more gray area within the duck search and how it's
Mm-hmm.
interpreted than I would say anywhere else that I've noticed in the NAVHDA
Yeah.
game.
I think, I would tell you probably the biggest area of nuance is tracking, is puppy tracking, because
Okay.
it's hard. Duck search is another one. I think the mantra that I have in my head that I got from my mentor is be a judge, not a scorekeeper. And I think going back to that achievement orientation, it really, maybe it's not necessarily even hunters versus non-hunters in NAVHDA, it's scorekeepers, right? And sort of like the grade grubbing, why did I get a this versus that? When it's, if you zoom out and go, what's an accurate picture of what the dog did applied to the root of what we're asking it, right? And so for me, that's in the duck search. And I don't know the scenario. I always have to do the caveat. But for me, in a body of water with marshy cover, if a dog swims in open water for 10 minutes, did it really? My question is, did it really search?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say no, and we're going to have a conversation as a team, and we're going to come to consensus. I think it's hard when you have conversations with one judge, because the beauty of the system, 3 judges is actually a protection for the handler, because I may see something, and if you were to judge, you may see something, and the third judge may see something. That's why we have those conversations, is because when they happen really fast, we're all on the same page. When they don't, it doesn't necessarily mean anything bad happened. It's hey, this thing happened. We need to talk about it. We're all going to come to our own score, which is a root of judging. Like I call it like standing and banging on your numbers. Like I tell apprentices all the time, write down a number and we'll talk about it. It doesn't have to be right. I write down numbers all the time that aren't right. But that's why, like, the beauty of this is we have 3 people that are going to have a civil discussion about what did we as a team see and what can we agree upon. And so maybe I saw in that open water. Maybe I saw a dog do an out and back in open water, but maybe another judge saw a duck out in that open water, and they're like, no, that dog stayed in the open water because it saw a duck, and who knows, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's hard. We can come up with 8,000 hypothetical scenarios, but I think, that I've said this recently with somebody, like, the 3 of us didn't fly to Tennessee to judge this test to be asses to everybody, and we're there because we would all love to see prize 1 dogs.
Yeah,
like that's super fun.
You don't want to spend a day in the field watching less than stellar dog work.
Yeah,
you want to see the best dog every run.
That's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't happen, but even in those times where it doesn't happen, if we can get one moment of like, oh, that was awesome, like that, we all love that.
Yeah.
But going back to the scenario, there is the beauty in that those 3 people of we're gonna have a conversation and go, what does this look like? And again, going back to like we're all infallible. When I was an apprentice, I remember this. When I first started out, I would end the day and I would have screaming headaches because you're drinking from a fire hose and you're thinking so much, and I can't miss this and I can't go to the bathroom, like, and I'm like, and my mentor was like, there's 3 other people out there, man. Like, you're gonna miss stuff. Like, accept it and know and be okay with. I didn't see that. Hey, Nick, what'd you see?
Yeah.
And this is why the apprenticeship program is so stringent. Is when you get through it, I know I can trust you. And I've had problems with apprentices where like they make stuff up, and I'm like, you can't be an apprentice because I can't trust you, you know? And so that the level of integrity to go, I missed that. I didn't see that. As well as to trust, I'm at this because I saw this, it means something, to go from a 3 to a 4 or a 2 or whatever. Sometimes we're having a conversation about, like on a drag, right? If you don't have an apprentice, there's one person on the end of the drag. We're relying on that person to give the whole team an accurate picture if something happened, what that looked like.
Yeah.
So, I think, like you said, it is a bit nebulous when you're training with one judge there and you're like, this, here's the scenario. What would you judge it? I could give you what I think it's a training scenario, but really it's about what the collective thinks. And so, the more we can, and I think NAVHDA especially is doing better at be a judge, not a scorekeeper. I don't want to say for a while, but in my experience, there are times where certain things, I think getting, if you've been around NAVHDA for a while, there's no more healing stakes. Healing stakes became a bit of a crutch of if you hit stakes or the dog gets out of stakes, there's a cadre of people that were like making that a math equation. And it's like, it's not, did the dog heal or not within the gradients of 0 through 4? But you can't, missing 2 gates isn't automatically insert number. We can't judge like that. Like, what did you see? Right? Because also, I have a friend of mine who's a large person who mistook their positionality in the gates and pushed the dog out of a gate. Going back to the teamwork, like, is that really a healing issue?
Yeah.
Or is it just the scenario didn't
play out
play out right? But because there were gates,
right,
there's an issue.
Yeah. And the committee, to me, this is the most valuable thing in the Aims and Rules Clinic, right? I came up here a couple years ago. You're judging the test while I did Blaine's seminar with Pete and everything. The fact that you recognize that it is discussed by a committee afterwards, but then not only just the fact that it is discussed, but realizing when you're in that position to where you have to actually verbalize what you saw and why you saw, and you gave the score of why you did it, it does offer a little bit more, at least in my case, confidence in the process.
Yeah.
Right, is you're not going out there and it's just like, judge saw a 3 and he marked it down to a 3. Like, no, you guys are actually sitting there like, what did you see? How did you interpret that? And then, if I'm at a 4 and you're at a 2, like we're gonna discuss this, and it's not just gonna automatically turn into a 3 because we meet in the middle, right? Like, there's actual.
I've had that happen where like I'm at a 2 and the 2 other people are at a 4, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, this, and this. I'm like, well, I didn't see that, but clearly you 2 did. So
yeah. And that's the important thing, to where, like, also this is a big standpoint of like, I will put a feather in the cap of the training day of when you do have 20 people at a training day, you can create that gallery to where then you can go out there. And if you are going to do a mock test, I've talked about, like, I think people only train the tests and they just set up mock test scenarios. Like, I would much rather see people set up true training drills. But if you're going to do a mock test, let's get the 15, 20 people all walking the same field. Everybody's watching the same dog. And after the sequence, stop and discuss it as if the judges would.
Yeah.
And then this is where, if you're going to run a mock test, this is where that conversation from the judge is important. On test day, I'm going to look at it as this. There's a time and a place for all of those conversations. But when you're forced to put into words how you interpreted or why you interpreted things a certain way, it makes you start understanding the bigger picture altogether. And you start seeing how everything kind of fits together, that by the end of the day, that utility test score and that prize means a little bit more because you understand the context that it went in to achieve that prize.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you got to, like Simon Sinek, right? Begin with the end in mind, right?
Yeah.
So if you know what all goes into this and why, you're going to be better off. I think that's why. Here's a good example, right? Why is there tracking in NA but no in utility? It's just a drag. And if you look at the drag, I believe there's no nose score on the drag. It's not about the nose. It's about obedience.
Yeah.
I told you to go fetch this thing, right? Whereas the track, that's not necessarily trained. It's a genetic disposition that we bring out through exposure, right? And that's really, I would tell you, that's the biggest wild card in NAVHDA is tracking, because dogs track so differently, and the bird and the scenario and the weather, and in it all depends on the dog. To your point about like being a judge and having this be helpful as a handler or hurtful. When I ran MAC in NA, I had hunted it all season. she'd track birds, wild birds, all the time. For whatever reason, on test day, she didn't want to track. She wanted to hunt, and um, literally to the point where I'm standing there, and I've been a judge. I think I was a senior judge at that point. Like, she's running around like an idiot and not focused. And finally, I turned around to the judge crew and I was like, "Are y'all done? Like, I know where I'm at. Like, can we? You can move on to the next dog. We don't need to waste more
I
time.
know this game. Yeah,
like we're good, y'all. Like, I this because it's as judges, we will let it go longer in the hopes that the dog gets better.
Yeah.
And I was at the point, especially knowing my dog, I'm like, this is not getting better. Let's get out of here, y'all.
Yeah. It's interesting, it's one of those, it naturally through other conversations on this podcast and different guests, like there's naturally going to be different sections to where, it may sound like I'm bashing NAVHDA quite often. And,
sure.
I try and be honest, pros and cons to everything, but I have said, and I still stand by the fact that I still think when you compare NAVHDA relative to other organizations and hunt tests specifically, I still think NAVHDA is the best option when it comes to like, it's the closest representation that you can set up. That doesn't mean that I agree with how everything is run. Like that, I could be king of the world and set it up a little bit better, at least in my thought process. But NAVHDA is the best option if you're looking at getting involved, meeting other people, networking, community, to where like if you do want to go down the rabbit hole and you do want to learn like more about the skill set, like it's all there to take it as serious or as light as you want to, depending on who you fall in line with. And that's why it's like, even though I get messages from occasion saying that I could take it easier on NAVHDA from time to time, but I do want to reiterate that is like I don't want people thinking I bash it, because I do appreciate it. I do appreciate when it is done with the bigger picture in mind. It produces a hell of a dog, and just the connections and networks. I mean, I can't tell you how many hunting trips I've been on because of other people that I've met through NAVHDA. And so whether it is the tracking situation or duck search or whatever, like just recognize that if you disagree with that one particular thing, like you're not alone. Like I have my reservations about both of those events and plenty others. But also recognize, like, if you go into it with the right mindset and you train the actual skill set and not just the test to get that prize on a piece of paper, your dog's going to be better off for it.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a life member. I'm a senior judge. Ugly Dog is the exclusive dog year partner and sponsor for NAVHDA. I believe in it wholeheartedly. I also understand that it's a system. Systems are imperfect, and systems aren't going to make everybody happy. I think, but this is you and I, as we've gotten to know each other, we place a premium on one thing, and that's how does whatever we're doing translate to wild bird hunting.
Right.
And I put my stake in the ground on that a lot. Somebody asked me on that Q&A that I do on Fridays, if wild bird hunting was gone, would you, or basically if you had to choose, would you only do NAVHDA or wild bird hunting? And I'm like, what's the point of NAVHDA if there's no wild bird hunting?
Yeah.
Because that's the end all be all. And if you do it right, and by right, I mean, understanding the underpinnings and then do setups. I think the trap that happens, even in chapters with people that do hunt wild birds a lot, is it becomes about, here's the test. Here's the tasks of the test. Let's do just the tasks of the test. And it's not, let's develop a functional hunting dog. My home chapter, one of the things that I love very much about it is they'll take all comers, whether you want to test or not. Mm-hmm. And it's, what do you want to work on? And let's work on that. When I joined that chapter, I was training a VDD dog. And it was, all right, well, let's do stuff that helps in the VDD test. Right. And so I think those chapters, in my opinion, operate the best because they're the most welcoming. They have a better community, and it's more about the individual and their goals than we're only going to train to the test. The test is such a small snapshot. You think about in the life of a 12 to 15-year-old hunting dog, if it runs 4 tests, it's under judgment for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Right. So is that really, we're always after the accurate picture of the dog, but you have to think about it. That's the accurate pic. If you're under judgment, it's the accurate picture of the dog in that moment, in that scenario, not the globalization of the thing.
Y'all don't get to see the context and backstory leading up to test day. You guys just get to see test day.
This
that's
thing,
it.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's, here's a good example. I was judging this summer. Guy was running a young dog, and I'm not trying to belabor this on a young dog, but this is a gentleman, pro trainer. He's running a dog. The dog's not quite done being force broke. And duck search, the dog goes out, does a killer duck search. I have to go out and shoot the duck. I shoot the duck. The dog gets the duck, comes and I see it get the duck. It starts swimming to the near shore. So I start walking back because I'm 200 yards away from the handler. The dog comes running by me, no more duck. That's like big problems, right? And don't want to get into like scores and all of that, but long story short, because it was a young dog, the guy couldn't get the dog to go get it again because it was so far away, and it just doesn't have the handles. That dog got a really bad score that day. That was a great dog, and it did a great thing. It was just too young and didn't have the training needed to accomplish everything that we would expect it to accomplish to get a great score, right? So if that's the only utility test that dog ever does, it has this sort of black mark on its record from a score perspective that arguably is an inaccurate picture of the hunting dog as a whole, but it was part of when it was run, and the handler made the choice of, I'm going to roll the dice and see what happens. And by the scenario went poorly for him.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's a bad dog. So that's part I think people don't, they forget. They get so caught up on, here's the task. You got to do the task. It's got to be a 4 task. Move on. And it's like, zoom out.
Yeah.
We're all better off if we zoom out.
Yeah. It's typically at the end of my episodes, I try and throw it to the guests and just say, what's something I should have asked you that I didn't or whatnot. But I want to save that for a second because we did just do an episode where you got to ask me a bunch of stuff, right? So I want to stay on. Let's zoom out on the NAVHDA test, and I want to get your personal take on it and whether you think there's any credence to it or not. Let's stick with the duck search. There's 2 things that I think personally. This is my thought process. I think I would like to see people with a NAVHDA consider improvements on the duck search from a couple different things. And we don't have to get into the logistics of like, does this add an asterisk, or let's leave the political stuff aside, just from a skill set point of view. Number 1 on duck search, if we had to send the dog in a specific like general area before giving them the independent hunt command. So instead of saying like, here's a giant body of water, go explore it, and it may take 20 minutes to find the duck. Let me send that dog in a specific direction, at least in like a general area, before they break out into an independent search. I think, back to application and functionality, that's what the average person would need in a duck blind, much more so than just a complete, just blind duck search.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a good idea. I guess for me, how I train is I'm going to pick a spot and be like, I want you to go there and expand. So I kind of already do that. You mentioned earlier, right? Like there's people that do train to like just go over, like to go in a straight line as far as you can. I think, if they're doing that and they're being successful, I think they're subverting the system. I think I like how it's sort of laid out of like at least the bookends of, and not counting the invitational, the bookends of natural ability and utility of, here is a puppy test, here is finished dog test. I think there is some conversation around redeveloping what we now call UPT. I think getting that, I would love for them to call it like the meat dog test,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In my brain, what you're saying, like I think about that, and maybe it's because I'm so ingrained in NAVHDA. I think about that like that's a reasonable expectation for a meat dog. Go like I need you to go like, to do a 20, 30-yard blind in a specific direction, and then expand from there.
Yeah.
Right. Um, I'm not opposed to something like that. I think I would actually like whatever organization, the more variety and opportunities you can give people, the better. So maybe this dives too much into the logistics, but I think to your question, I'm more in the camp of like keep particularly NA and utility,
What they've been.
and we need to have some conversations, I think, about how to tweak those in certain areas. But how can we then take all of these more other scenarios and put them into work to develop a better functional hunting dogs? Because I do think all of the, like we've talked a lot about wild bird hunting. I think a lot of people don't test utility because the expectation is so high that they turn off, right? And maybe because they turn off, people have less quality hunting dogs. Whereas if you figured out a way to keep people engaged in more of that like meat dog level, I think Grayson and Stump like just did sort of a podcast about this, like a little more of that meat dog.
The non-training culture.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like how can you have a test? And people are achievement oriented, so they're always going to want to do better. But like, how can you get at if you wanted to take your dog to Montana and you've never been? What are the things that you need to have to help you have a functional hunting dog on that trip? It doesn't need to be finished. There's a difference between functional and finished.
Right.
Right. And utility, what we expect is finished, which is that's where I go to like duck search. Like, finished work is go, figure it out. Right. Meat dog is I'll get you in the area, then help me out.
Yeah.
Right. There's like some, at least in my mind, some dependence that can be relied on there. Yeah, I like where you're going with that. I think there's like fun things to do with that. There's a handful of us that have talked about like you said, like targets of opportunity for ducks. We never do like jump shooting.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is like that whole remain by, steady by blind sequence. I use that jump shooting.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yep. Same here.
The training of you lay down here. We're all going to walk up here and shoot. I don't have to worry about you from a safety perspective because you're going to lay here. We can go shoot, and then I can call you up and be like, go pick them up.
That is a real world. I've used that.
Yeah.
In an actual, I stop, I go jump shoot ducks. Yeah, same exact thing. And it's just interesting because for every suggestion like this, like I could come up with, I could rattle off like 20 different things on how to improve this. But again, it's getting into the minutia and the weeds and all this stuff because I feel like I have a pretty decent argument of why I think the duck search should be at the invitational and the blind should be at the utility. We don't have to get into that right now. But
the thing we probably should have led with this because now we're in it is like, if you're training dogs, like they're somewhat of a type A personality, and to the leadership of NAVHDA, if you're listening to this, I want you I respect you all a lot because what happens is you have 10,000 members that are having this conversation, and there's sky's the limit for ideas, and they have the hard job of trying to navigate the ship as best they can. So I do want to be very, very.
What's realistic? How do we apply it? What does this mean to everybody that's come before? There's a lot of considerations on this stuff. But if anybody, if the big wigs at NAVHDA are listening to this and they want to hear my thoughts on the moving to duck search to the invitational, just call me. I'll let you know. The second improvement, if you will, or at least consideration in the duck search that I would like to throw your way. I personally would like to see you have to find the duck as a requirement.
So that you're newer in NAVHDA, so you're not familiar with what shackled duck.
I am familiar with that, and I honestly still think, and this is an unintended consequence. I hear too many people saying, "Well, they don't have to find the duck." We just
Yeah.
need the dog to go out there. And I've even heard people say, I hope that if they come across the duck, they don't even acknowledge it because then they have to get graded on the
Yeah, and that's
retrieve.
then you're
And it
teaching to the test, not
Right,
real
and
world
it
application.
goes back into the real world application and functionality of this. Is like,
Correct.
I want a dog. If we're going to teach this skill and it's as
Hmm.
valuable as we pretend it to be, I think you should have to find the duck. There's a lot of things that go into that, but I've also been to enough tests now. I feel like you've been to much more than me. I feel like when you're adding ducks after every dog, you
Hmm.
know that there is a duck out there. And okay, well, let's extend it to where maybe instead of a minimum time frame of 10 minutes, let's bump it up to 20 minutes and they just have to find the duck. And if they don't find the duck on this
Hmm.
body of water in 20 minutes, like you had your shot.
Sure.
Uh, I think that real world application, personally, I
Yeah.
think that that would alleviate the people going out there and hoping that
Sure.
their dog doesn't come across a duck, and
Yeah.
it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth every time
Yeah.
I hear
I
that.
agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that completely. That if you're approaching, again, going back to like being nervous, right, and trusting your training, if that's your level of trust your training's not where it should be,
Yeah.
right? So you're not ready, right? You need to be, again, real world application. And so now to your point about shackle duck, um, I have maintained this opinion for a long time. Like, it's my opinion. I'm going to be very clear. To my knowledge, I don't know that it'll ever get changed back. But as a duck hunter, and I will say, I think NAVHDA really places a lot of people really focus on field. The water work is water work, but in my experience, not a lot of people in NAVHDA hunt ducks, or not enough people, in my opinion, hunt ducks, and they should, because it's a versatile dog, right? Like, but the focus has really skewed towards field, not ducks. Um, I, again, the lens through which I view it is this is a hunting dog test. I have been very vocal with a number of people. I was just having this conversation recently. Um, the invitational should be, in my opinion, this is my opinion, a display of the best hunting dogs and the capabilities of the best hunting dogs in the system. And and so in what does that look like for me as Mike Neiduski? I can go anywhere in the country and cut my dog loose, and they're going to be steady to wing shot and fall. They're going to retrieve the hand. They're going to back their brace mate at the water. They're going to be respectful of another dog retrieving in front of them, and they're going to do a 100-yard blind. Anywhere, any water. Similar to you, of like, people are like, oh, I don't want him to catch the duck. Oh, I don't like the look across the pond. I hate that discussion,
Yeah.
because when you duck hunt, do you pick what the water looks like? Do you pick what your approach looks like? Do you pick how you get there? I mean, you could. Doesn't mean you're going to be in ducks. So like, you're subject in a real world scenario to do what's in front of you. Now people will say like, oh, well, it's already manufactured, so it's, you can't always say that. I'm like, but we should, in my opinion, the eye should be to how do we make this as
Right.
realistic as possible. So to your point, I, because we had the shackle duck and changed it, I like the shackle duck in the invitational, and I think, and this is where I think that it even says in the Ames book, like, part of having a dog is a conservation of game tool, right? It's to get wounded game back. What better test of that than to introduce wild, or not wild, but crippled game into the scenario and have that play a part? I don't know why. I don't know who all was involved in that, and I don't know why that was changed. I will own that. But to me, there's been conversation that if people have said to me they didn't love the subjectivity because you had to get the duck. Hunting is subjective. We
Yeah.
cripple birds. People don't like to talk about that, but that is a fact of hunting. If you hunt long enough, you are going to cripple a bird. And for me, that is gut wrenching. Whether it's a bobwhite quail or a pheasant or a grouse, I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And what more realistic application of that than in this scenario? There's a wounded duck out there, go get it, and you didn't get it. A realistic hunting scenario is you get bad breaks.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not to play semantics and, this word means that, but like if the whole purpose of a search is to find
Yeah.
the object of that search, then technically, if you don't get the duck, then that is a failed search. If you look at it
Sure.
that way, right?
Yeah.
Oversimplification, but that's the way I look at it. And again,
Yeah.
it's if I was king of the world,
Yeah. This is like funny. What is it? 1:30 in the afternoon, and we're talking like we've had like 6 bourbons, and
right?
it's 10:30 at night.
Oh man, don't give me the bourbons and get me on this topic. It's funny. I have a
Yeah.
select handful of NAVHDA junkies as listeners, right?
Yep.
And anytime I say any negative thing about NAVHDA, I hear from them. But also when I say something positive, I hear from them.
Well, good.
But when I talk to them, I've floated the idea of when we are all in one place at one time, we're gonna play King of the World of like how we would create the perfect NAVHDA testing system.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's fun to do it and fun to play what ifs, but having a great idea and how to actually implement it realistically in a fair, repeatable manner.
Yeah.
Some of the ideas like that's I've heard some ideas and I'm like, great idea, not even in the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But yeah. That being said, as we wrap this up,
Sure.
Between the conversation we had on yours and now this one, is there something that we didn't address that you wanted to or we overlooked?
Man,
I mean, you and I could go on for days,
hours and hours. That's a good question. I will say to your point, like I'm glad that while we had a like how would we do things differently, I think it is important to say like for the folks that are running now, because this I feel like it's been particularly the last half has been a NAVHDA-centric conversation, that those folks like they're doing yeoman's work, to steer that ship and help improve it and not reduce the integrity of what's come past. And we can come up with 8,000 ways that we should do things differently. But at the end of the day, the system's the system, and we agree to play the game, so we're going to play the game.
right?
From a question perspective, no, I think we took some dives there. I appreciate this type of conversation because I'd be curious on your take. I think people are somewhat afraid to have like, let's have some honest conversation about like, does it work? Does it not work? What's your opinion? We've had a lot of opinion-based conversations, but feedback is important. Diversity of thought is important. And so I love that we've had this space to be like, if we're king of the world, what the hell would we do?
Right.
Because that's how you do find ideas, right? Going back to training, that in like, I can't remember which podcast we talked about it on, but that fear of failure, right? And let's try it.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Let's just send it.
Yeah. I really, really do appreciate that. So I guess all that to say, no, because the hard part is if I throw out an idea, it could be another 2-hour conversation.
There's always that chance. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like I enjoy bringing new thoughts and perspectives and ideas to the podcast, whether I even agree with it or not. I think a lot of people listening to this, and I don't know if you get this on your podcast yet or not, but I think a lot of people assume that if I just have somebody on the podcast that I automatically agree with them.
Sure.
And I have had some people like, I can't believe you let so-and-so on the podcast and you gave them a platform. And I'm like, and I get accused of taking things too serious sometimes, right? But I think it is important to explore these new ideas and create what you're just describing. I think a lot of people are afraid to just throw ideas or new concepts out there. And I think if what we actually say is true and we all want to learn and create new ways and better and improve ourselves, then we can't be afraid to throw new stuff out there, especially if it's honest perspectives. That's something that I think the community is getting better at. A few years ago, you never saw or heard anybody talking about the real honest training mishaps, or let alone showing them on video. And you're starting to see more and more of that. People are getting more comfortable with just showing their just amateur approach to training on social media. And, we can disparage the merits of social media all we want, but there are some good aspects of it. And I think and it's something that it's motivated me to try and get more comfortable sharing some of my own personal experiences, right? And but that's how you explore and you develop and improve on new things is you actually discuss the merits of new options. And I am, anybody that's listened to this, especially this year, this summer particularly, I'm not afraid to go new places with new people and let's dive deep. That doesn't mean that I agree with everything they say, but I've been around enough tables with the Rick Smiths and the Mo Lindleys and the Martha Greenleys and the Del Mars. I've spoken to them enough to know that when they say they're always learning, they mean that they're always learning and they're open to new ideas. But then meanwhile, the average Joe that's in the space that looks up to those people are really quick to say, well, that's not how they do it.
Yeah.
And it's like get that out of your mindset and start looking at things from the actual what we're actually talking about in that moment.
So it's why you asked me what I would want to bring up. You just hit the nail on the head as something perfect to chit chat about real quick. And what you said is so important in today's day and age where it's I'm right. Most people sort of default to I'm right or what method I use or whatever. The whole my 12 gauge is better than your whatever.
Yeah.
I think diversity of thought is important. And you and I have known each other a long time and we don't always agree. And I can think of a handful of people in NAVHDA that if they listen to this and they'll know I'm talking about them, we don't always agree. We can have a beer at the end of the night and agree to disagree and move on, but also agree that the diversity of thought and opinion and conversation has helped move the ball forward, or at least given some people, things to ponder. And if anything, I hope that folks have listened to it. Like, we've shared some pretty strong opinions. If nothing else, I hope that they go, well, what does a real world hunting scenario look like for me?
Yeah.
And how do I apply that, right? But what's important is the ability to have diverse perspectives and conversations in a place where it doesn't devolve to F you and F you too.
Right.
Right. I think about, so being in business for myself, I do a lot of reading around business and podcasts and things. And I can't remember where I read this, but it was a story about one of the CEOs of GM a number of years ago. And, like 70s or 80s or something. And he brought his whole C-suite into a room and went, hey, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, Z. What do y'all think about that? And everybody was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And he went, cool. You're all going to come back on Thursday and tell me why this is a terrible idea, because we need to have some conversation about, like, we need to have some disagreement, and disagreement is healthy and it helps move the ball forward. And so that's part of why I love that you'll go there and have some of these conversations or have some of these outside perspectives, because even as in these two conversations that you and I have had, there's been things that you've said where I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Oh, that's going to spin in my brain for a little while. And people forget, like, that's how you learn.
Yeah. That is how you explore the ideas. And not to jump on the soapbox, but there's a million things that I've said and done on this podcast. I guarantee you plenty of people have been like, I don't agree with that.
Sure.
I've seen some of the messages, right?
Yeah.
But that is part of even just the enjoyment. Like, let's even get off the soapbox and talk about like how we're going to improve and solve all the world's problems by doing this. Let's just talk about it from just an enjoyment perspective. Yeah. Like, I don't want the day in, day out to be the exact same thing. That would bore me to death. Some people like that monotonous, routine day after day. I need the change, and I like it when people pose things that make me think, especially if it's something that I'm bought into, and they like add a new perspective or a new wrinkle that's like, I didn't consider that aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's like you just gave me an answer on the duck search and field search, to where it's like it's always been black and white to me. I've asked numerous judges, but just the perspective of, as a handler, I'm staying here, they're going out on the duck search. In the field, I'm moving with them. There's different context. That's a new perspective. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go back and think on that some more. And then, I still will probably come back and be like, nope, consistency. We need a 4 in search no matter what. But that's how we explore things. And if anybody's listening to this podcast, whether you agree with me on anything, I hope you stick around, because I'm trying to bring new people into the space, because I think the gun dog world, and the
Mhm.
dogs, more importantly, deserve fresh perspectives. And if we can improve upon it, we will. And also, I just think that it's important that if you are involved in NAVHDA, NASTRA, NARA,
Yeah.
fill in the blank with whatever alphabet soup that you want, uh, challenging the people to think outside the box
Sure.
and getting out of their comfort zone to where we've always done it this way for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
So not I don't want to be disrespectful to like the people that come before me, but again, so
Yeah. 30 years ago, we didn't use e-collars.
right. Things have changed, and I don't want to be callous about it, but I think it's important. But
Yeah. Well, to your point, I mean, you leaning into the working dog space this year, like that has been a super fascinating thing for me. It has really opened my world, to like really thinking critically about training in different contexts and how that we should like cross pollinate. Because I forget which one of the episodes you were doing, but there was something in it where you were talking about working dogs, and it clicked for me. I think it was the conversation with Randall, and he basically, one of you were talking about, sporting dogs jumped dog training knowledge,
yeah,
and then the war on terror happened, and military working dogs really had to catch up to speed, and now that sort of jumped sporting dog knowledge, and they're operating on a completely different plane. And there's people in the sporting dog world, and me included, that could look to that and fill their tool belt with a whole host of things
yeah,
to achieve things. And that's what I think, on my podcast I talked about wanting a working dog, and that is why, is because I want to do it with a working dog to learn the fundamentals, to go, all right, like drive is drive,
yeah,
whether it's for a ball or it's for a bird. How do we harness that in the ways that they're doing it for working dogs, with dogs that have, if you don't play that drive the right, have dire consequences? How do you take that handling and that control and take it to a dog, bird hunting dog, and let them have their independence, but also
yeah.
have them be obedient? So, but you don't do that unless you think outside the box and go, I want to interview some working dog people and
Yeah.
figure out how maybe this will translate.
It's not a knock on anybody else, but
Yeah.
it's like I can either do the 12th episode on the Smith method
Sure.
or I can go get some fresh ideas and perspectives, and whether you like them or not, maybe you pick up on like one little trick and throw in your toolbox, because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, the working dogs, they're still hunting. They're just hunting people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And drive is drive. And it's funny, and it's interesting how often, I mean, we were talking when we walked earlier today about, certain things that you're working on. And I was like, I can tell you how the working dog guys do that. And you're all about it. Whether you apply it or not, that's a different thing. But it so many people are just like, all they see is what's been in the space for 50 years.
Yeah.
And again, nothing wrong with that. I've said it a million times. If that's you, cool. But don't be afraid to step out of the box. I've been at the table enough with these people to where Mo Lindley has an isolation table. I sat there. One of the first things he asked me about when I showed up at his place was how much attention I pay to the working dog space. And at the time, I'm like, I mean, a little, but not much. And he was playing with that isolation table for his force fetch program underneath his little canopy.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mo Lindley. Training with Mo, West Method. Like, one of the first things he asked me is like, are you familiar with this? As if he's going to try and steal a cheat code from me on something that I was, ended up being unfamiliar with. But it just goes to show that, like, he had his normal force fetch table where he's been doing force fetch for decades.
Yeah.
But when you first pull up, he had this nice little isolation table that's completely foreign to the gun dog world.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show these people, the trainers that really are after it, they're not afraid to explore novel concepts.
Yeah.
And that's my encouragement to everybody else, is like, look, challenge people with new ideas.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more fun too.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, because like, I'm gonna throw it out there. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it won't.
Yeah.
We'll try again tomorrow.
I'll see it.
I mean, I'm in business for myself. That's part of, like, honestly, that's part of the fun of it. It's like, what worked today? All right, let's do more of that. What didn't work today? Let's not do that.
Let's
anymore.
do less than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the same as dog training. Man, I actually had a number of things in my head that I thought we were going to get to, but we'll just have to save it for the next go around. Enjoyed, sharing the field this morning for a quick little walk, and I'm sure we'll do it again, but we'll hop off here and check back later.
Absolutely. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.